Okay, so picture this, a country, an aging population, and their eyes are turning towards a continent just brimming with youthful potential. Sounds interesting, right? That's exactly what we're diving into today. It's Japan's strategy to get more students from African countries into their universities.
Hmm.
And we'll be going through excerpts from this article called Japan Set on Luring More Students from African Countries. It was published by University World News.
Okay.
So what are we trying to get at today? Well, we really want to uncover not just the what, like what's happening, but the why. Like, why is Japan doing this? What could it mean for both sides, Japan and these African countries? And maybe we'll find some surprising things along the way.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting here is this really stark demographic contrast, right?
Right.
Japan, as you may know, is facing a pretty significant challenge with its rapidly aging population
Hmm.
and a declining birth rate. This has far-reaching consequences for Japan, both socially and economically. Just imagine a society where the elderly outnumber the young. That's the reality that Japan is trying to navigate.
Wow. And on the other side of the coin, you have Africa, which boasts the fastest growing young population globally.
Right.
Almost like two puzzle pieces.
Precisely. And Japan sees this as a very unique opportunity, a chance to inject youthful energy, diversify its student body,
Uh-huh.
which, by the way, is currently dominated by students from other Asian countries, and also to potentially address its demographic concerns in the long term. But, it goes beyond the numbers. And what's really interesting to me is how Japan is strategically leveraging a pre-existing cultural connection.
Okay, now let's talk about this cultural connection a little. So you're probably aware of just how popular Japanese pop culture is around the world, right? Especially things like anime and manga.
Yeah.
So picture this fascination with Japanese subculture. It's not just a Western thing. It's huge in Africa.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And Japan is capitalizing on this existing cultural affinity. I think it's worth thinking about, rather than just stating that it's popular in Africa. Like, why is it so popular?
Yeah.
Like, what are the specific things, about these, about Japanese anime, about manga, that resonate with African audiences?
Right.
Is it the themes, the art style, something else entirely? This is where it gets really interesting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like they've found common ground through shared
Hmm.
interests, kind of a bridge across continents. And Japan is hoping, hoping that this cultural exchange will cultivate long-term relationships, nurturing what they call Friends of Japan in Africa.
Friends of Japan, yeah.
But, let's actually look at the concrete steps they're taking to make this happen. They've launched a dedicated program, haven't they?
They have, yeah. The Study in Japan for Africa program. This initiative focuses on some key disciplines like robotics, AI, biotechnology, environmental studies, and information technology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All fields that are, really crucial for development both in Japan and in Africa.
Yeah, and they've set some pretty ambitious goals, too. They're aiming to increase the number of African students in Japan from nearly 2,000 in 2023 to 2,500 by 2028.
Yeah.
That's a big jump.
It is, and they're even establishing regional offices in Botswana and Kenya,
Oh, wow.
specifically to facilitate this process.
Mm.
They're really putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. They're really demonstrating a concrete commitment. These offices should be set up by April 2025.
It's more than just logistics, though. There seems to be a real, genuine belief in the power of education
Absolutely.
to make a positive change.
Yeah, there's a quote from Professor Miyamoto. She's the Sub-Saharan Africa director of the program. And during her visit to Kenya, she really emphasized the program's goal to provide a pathway for young Africans to acquire quality education.
So we're seeing like a blend of pragmatism and strategic thinking, but also a genuine desire to make a difference in the world. Pretty compelling, huh?
Yeah.
But this whole initiative, it extends beyond just getting students into classrooms. It's about something much larger.
I mean, you're alluding to the concept of soft power, this idea that cultural exchange can kind of subtly yet profoundly influence the relationships between nations.
Hmm.
Think about the impact that your favorite book or movie has had on how you see the world, right?
Right.
Now magnify that on a global scale. That's the potential of soft power.
It's mind-boggling. And Japan, they're playing a long game here. They've got another program, right?
They do.
Called the ABE Initiative, and it offers master's degrees and internships in Japan, but specifically for African professionals.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating program.
This one really emphasizes supporting industry development in Africa.
That's right. And I think it's really intriguing to compare the ABE initiative with the MEXT scholarship program.
Oh, okay.
MEXT is much broader in scope.
Uh-huh.
It caters to various countries and academic levels.
Mm.
But the ABE initiative is really laser focused on equipping African professionals, giving them the skills and the knowledge that they can bring back to their own communities. It's about, empowering individuals to really drive progress on their own terms.
It seems like Japan is really coming at this from all angles, like weaving together education, cultural exchange, and this like long-term vision for collaboration.
Hmm.
But while there are so many positives for both Japan and Africa, are there any downsides? Are there any unintended consequences we should be thinking about?
That's a really important point. Some critics have argued that this whole initiative, while it is well-intentioned, it could lead to brain drain in Africa. So these skilled individuals who've received this world-class education in Japan might choose to just stay there instead of going back and contributing to their home countries. What do you think about that?
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely a chance of that happening. But wouldn't those skills and knowledge they gained, wouldn't that ultimately benefit Africa if they did return?
yeah.
Maybe the key is to create a good environment in their home countries that actually encourages them to come back?
I think you're absolutely right. Addressing those root causes of brain drain, like lack of opportunities
Mm-hmm.
or political instability, that's really crucial. It's got to be a win-win scenario
Right.
where these individuals feel empowered to contribute both to their own personal growth and to the development of their countries.
So it sounds like this initiative, like many other complex things, is going to encounter challenges along the way. Being adaptable, and constantly learning seems pretty crucial here.
Absolutely. What aspects of the program do you think might, require the most adaptation as things progress? For example, how can they actually cater to the diverse needs and backgrounds of all these different students? Make sure they have the support they need to thrive in a totally new environment.
That's a good point. I mean, things like cultural sensitivity training, for both the Japanese faculty and the African students, that could create a much more inclusive and understanding environment.
Yeah, I agree.
And what about mentorship programs that connect African students with, professionals in their fields?
Hmm.
That could make the transition back to their home countries easier, if they choose to go back.
I think that's a great idea. And beyond all of these practical things, we can't forget the human element of this. This whole exchange isn't just about statistics. It's about people. It's about their aspirations, their experiences, their contributions.
Right. Their voices are key to actually understanding what's going on. What motivates African students to pick Japan? What are their hopes and aspirations for the future? These are the questions we need to answer.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that these students aren't just one big group, right?
Right.
They come from such diverse backgrounds. They all have their own unique experiences and skills and perspectives. Listening to their stories can give us such a valuable insight into the real-world impact of this initiative.
Their stories could also show us the benefits that you can't really measure.
Yeah.
Things like cross-cultural understanding, the connections they make, the broadening of perspectives.
Right.
These things all contribute to a richer and more interconnected world.
I completely agree. And it's also important to remember that this isn't happening in isolation. Japan has a long history with Africa, especially through development assistance. So this student initiative is kind of building on that, strengthening those ties in a way that's good for everyone.
It's like weaving this tapestry of connections, and education and culture are like the threads. And who knows what the effects of all this will be? It could be felt for generations.
It's true. However, as we go deeper into the potential here, we also need to acknowledge the potential challenges of cultural exchange.
Oh, yeah.
Cultural differences, while enriching, can lead to misunderstandings
Right.
or make it difficult to adapt to a new environment.
What do you think are some things that both the Japanese and African participants might struggle with? And how can those be addressed proactively?
Well, I think communication styles, for example, how you communicate can vary a lot
Mm.
across different cultures.
Hmm.
What one culture considers polite or assertive could be seen completely differently in another. And things like academic expectations and teaching styles, those can differ too.
Yeah, that's true.
So both students and instructors might need to adjust.
These are all good points. I think the key here is open communication and cultural sensitivity training and just a willingness to adapt. And at the end of the day, these challenges, if they're addressed well, can lead to a much richer and more impactful experience for everyone. It's amazing how these little cultural things can have such a big impact on something like this. It seems like both sides have a lot to learn from each other, not just academically, but culturally too. This really shows just how important cultural sensitivity and open dialogue are, don't you think?
It does, yeah. It's an ongoing process, really, a journey of understanding and adapting. But but I think the potential rewards definitely outweigh the challenges here. I mean, imagine the possibilities, right? Like a fusion of ideas, artistic collaborations, innovations that could come from bringing together all these different minds. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's about way more than just filling up classrooms or achieving economic goals. It's about building understanding between cultures, breaking down stereotypes, building bridges between continents.
Exactly. And it's important to keep in mind that this whole initiative is still pretty new. We're only just starting to see the impact it's having. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops in the coming years.
It really will. And we've just scratched the surface today. There's so much more to explore here. Like the personal stories of the students, the long-term effects on both Japan and Africa, and even whether this model could be used somewhere else.
I really encourage you, the listener, to keep digging into this on your own. Maybe you could look into the experiences of those African students who are studying in Japan, or you could research similar programs happening in other parts of the world. What other countries do you think could benefit from something like this? What global problems could we tackle through this kind of collaboration?
That's a great point. It's one thing for us to talk about it here, but it's really something else when our listeners go out and explore these ideas themselves, come to their own conclusions.
Right, it's about taking information and turning it into action, using what you know to keep exploring and maybe even sparking new initiatives.
So, okay, let's recap what we talked about today. We started with Japan. They've got a shrinking population and they're looking for a solution. And they've turned their attention to Africa, which has this rapidly growing youth population.
And they've set up this strategic program to attract more African students to their universities. And they're focusing on areas that are vital for both regions. But it goes beyond academics, too. Japan is using this existing connection they have through the popularity of Japanese pop culture in Africa.
Right. It's like they're weaving together education and cultural exchange to create lasting relationships. They're making friends of Japan in Africa, as they call it. And it's good for everyone involved. Japan gets an influx of talented young people, and the students get a world-class education. And they can potentially take those skills and that knowledge back home to help their countries.
It's a really fascinating example of strategic thinking, cultural diplomacy, and just believing the power of education to bring people together.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about. What can other countries learn from this? What will the long-term effects be for Japan, for Africa, and for the world?
Here's a final thought for you to consider. We've talked about the benefits for Japan and Africa, but what about for the whole world? Could this model be used to tackle other problems we all face, like climate change or global health issues? Could this be the start of a new way for countries to work together, driven by education, understanding different cultures, and having a shared vision for a better future?
It's definitely something to think about. And that wraps up our deep dive into Japan's African Student Initiative. We hope this sparked your curiosity and that you'll go learn more about this. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those deep dives going.